I'm going to show you how to use a clipping mask for something new today that you might not have thought of before. We're typically used to using clipping masks to just kind of crop a picture in Illustrator. So for example, on here I have a background photo that I got off of NASA's Flickr. It's an open source photo of the frozen Great Lakes. And I put a box on top of it, rectangle, the same size as my artboard, and grouped or selected both of them, right-clicked, and made a clipping mask. And that lets you kind of just frame out the picture. The whole picture is still there. We didn't do anything to it, but it is now in that frame is all we see. So that rectangle we put on top is all we see. So now I'm going to go and create a new layer and lock this layer and bring in a photo that I want to do the same thing to, essentially, but with a more custom shape than just like a rectangle. And so I'm going to go to File, Place, and put in another open source photo that I found online. And this is a hot air balloon. And I'm going to resize it a little bit, but I can do that more later. And this one's not as high resolution as my other one. And I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to trace the outer edge where I want to put that mask, that frame. And so I'm going to kind of go around and use my pen tool to create a custom path defined by the edge of the hot air balloon. And so just like when we did our superheroes, I'm going to kind of trace what I want to be the shape. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to come around and if I click and hold, it makes it a curve. If I just click, it makes it a sharp edge, which isn't going to work for this. So I'm going to click and pull so I get my handles and take my time going around the outside of this shape. If I mess up, I can Command Z and go back as much as I need to in here. If I kind of am off, I can fix it later, which is nice. And in this area, it's kind of harder. It's not ideal in Illustrator because of all the kind of empty blue background. This area would look better in Photoshop. But I'm going to go around here, getting these kind of edges. And again, I can fix it up later. And don't be afraid to zoom in. I should actually be zooming in way more in that area. I'll go back and fix it in a minute. And if the curve is going the direction I don't want it to, I could just go back and re-click my last anchor point, and it kind of resets that curve, so I can then define it by where I put the next anchor point. So remember, those lines coming off of the anchor points with curves are called handles. And a curve typically has one handle going in each direction off of the anchor point. And the length and the position of those affects the curve. So again, for demo, I'm going kind of fast, but you should zoom in and really take your time. It'll make it easier to not have to fix up too much later. And get back to where you started. Close your path. I'm going to put a stroke on here so you can kind of see it. And we can look and check and see what might need touched up. So using my space bar, I can quickly kind of go into that hand tool to move around, so I don't have to zoom in and zoom out and use my button and go way far off. And I'm going to use my direct selection tool and go in there and fix any anchor points that I don't like, the curves, the handles, adjust them. If I got too much, if I'm too far off the edge. Here I'm really going to zoom in because I went a little too fast. Remember, the direct selection tool is your friend. And if you find that your handles, you've got one kind of curving in a way you don't like, you can always hold Option to just adjust one side. Where, you know, if you don't hold it, when you do, you'll have kind of two, you'll have both moving. So you can use that Option key. And I feel like I went too far in between points here. So I'm going to add an anchor point. So I have a little more control over this section. And try not to move everything else. I'm just cleaning up my shape to make it nice and even. And again, the more you pay attention and take your time in the first part, you don't really have to go back and fix as much as I am here. And that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to select both that path that I just made and my picture using my regular selection tool. I'm going to right click. Make clipping mask, and there we go. So that's a way that you don't have to use Photoshop if you're not ready, or you've never used it, or it's a really simple shape that doesn't need a lot of kind of interior spaces. Clicked out. And now we have a hot air balloon floating over the frozen Great Lakes from space.